Today's episode was recorded in front of a live audience at Emory University's Oxford campus as part of its inaugural Ideas Fest. Please be sure to check out our other episodes, including one with rapper Denzel Curry, on which he talks about anime with a Japanese cultural anthropologist. Don't forget to click subscribe, and please rate the show on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening.
You may have heard this, like people say Atlanta's not a real place. I mean, it really isn't. Like there's no other place like Atlanta. You know, I've lived in LA, I've been to New York, I've been to different places, and I'm always ready to get home to Atlanta. And so I think being able to be a part of a community that, regardless of whether you had $1 to your name, like we were taught that we was the you know what I'm saying? We believed it.
Welcome to Atlanta where the players play and we ride on them things like every day. Big beats hit streets, see gangsters roaming and parties don't stop till 8 in the morning.
Welcome to Atlanta where the players play and we ride on them things like every day. Big beats hit streets, see gangsters roaming and parties don't stop till 8 in the morning.
Welcome to Sing for Science, the show where musicians and scientists talk about music and science. I'm your host, Matt White. Each week, we'll talk about a song by our guest artist and how it connects with our guest scientist's area of expertise. Today, we'll be speaking with Atlanta music icon Jermaine Dupri. Jermaine is a multi-Grammy-winning producer, songwriter, rapper, and music executive who played a pivotal role in elevating Atlanta as a global hub for Southern hip-hop and R&B. More than a decade into his career as a hit maker, Jermaine teamed up with Ludacris to record the 2002 anthem, Welcome to Atlanta. The song's lyrics and accompanying video demonstrate the degree to which Atlanta had become a cultural phenomenon in the early 2000s. Also joining us is Georgia Tech culture scholar, Dr. Joycelyn Wilson. Dr. Wilson completed her PhD in the field of educational anthropology, which examines how culture affects education and, in turn, how culture is influenced by educational settings, both formal and informal. Joycelyn's 2020 TED Talk, For Those Who Love God and Trap Music, explores the key conditions that enabled Atlanta's post-civil rights creative class to transform this city into a thriving epicenter for hip-hop and R&B. The title of this week's episode on the podcast is Welcome to Atlanta, tracing the rise of a hip-hop and R&B capital with cultural anthropology. Emory University, please help me welcome to the stage the already seated Jermaine Dupri and Dr. Joycelyn Wilson.
What's up, y'all?
Gotcha. Okay,
Yeah,
cool,
thank
thanks.
you. So Jermaine, I'm eager to know what it was like to be not just on the inside of such a giant cultural moment, but also as one of its chief architects. So maybe like a good place to start would be to ask you to talk about how the idea for this song came about, when it did in your career.
I think this song, it's been in my head was in my head for a long time. Probably since the 90s. Because once Crisscross came out, I realized how people viewed Atlanta. And other cities didn't know how valuable Atlanta was to just culture, period. And I don't think people that lived in Atlanta knew how valuable Atlanta was to culture and how much culture was coming out of Atlanta. Atlanta actually is a city that pours the word culture. Like, it's other cities that think they have that, and I'm not saying that just because I'm from Atlanta. I'm saying this is just by me going around and seeing other places and being in other cities. Atlanta just is a pouring city of like the culture in the city and things that we grew up on that have stayed around. You know, if you go to like other cities, things that were alive and vibrant when you were a kid, they probably don't exist anymore, right? But in Atlanta, things that were going when I was 12 years old are still just as hot as they were when I was 12. Right now. So it's me seeing that, and when I wrote the song, it was a time period when Atlanta was like Vegas in the South. And I don't know if people even, Atlanta stayed open till 6 in the morning. And like what I say in the song, we never went to, and I didn't, like I said, I was going to other places, and you go to California, you go to Los Angeles closed at 2 o'clock. Chicago closed at 2 o'clock. Detroit, all of these major cities closed at 2 o'clock. But they never treated Atlanta like it was a major city, right? So I used to go through the airport, and they used to have these stores where you can buy T-shirts and things. And in the store, they used to have these shirts that had Tokyo, New York, Chicago, and something, L.A. There's like 4 cities on there. I don't know what the shirt, but you used to have these shirts. And I used to always look at that shirt and be like, why they don't put Atlanta on this shirt? And I just start like really paying attention to people not paying attention to Atlanta. And, we had a song, Georgia on my mind, but I don't feel like I live in Georgia. I live in Atlanta.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because when this came out, I was bartending a hotel in New York City, and it was everything Atlanta. White hipsters saying, crunk this, crunk that, you know what I mean? It was just like, it was a cultural phenomenon, you know what I mean? And at this point, it's like 10 years or so into your career making hits. So, I mean, how far before it came out did you realize that you were part of something larger? Beyond your, pride associated with the city and what it had to offer, but that you felt that it was actually being exported?
I don't think I ever really knew that I was doing something even like Criss Cross. Criss Cross was the first group signed to a major label. Well, pretty much. I actually signed the first group that was signed to the first label. I'm getting that confused. My first group, Silk Times Leather, was the first group in Atlanta signed to a major record label. I never knew this till Hip Hop 50 just happened and people started telling me, right? So it took me 30 years to realize that I did something. I wasn't paying no attention to that. I was just trying to get my music heard and get out. And like I said, at some point I realized that I lived in a special place. And that's when the Welcome to Atlanta song was like, we got to make something about this, because I felt like I said, once again, Atlanta was being left out. You go to New York, they got Frank Sinatra has a song. Now Jay-Z has a song. And, you go to L.A. and I Love L.A. They played that at the Lakers game. And I used to go to Hawks games and be like, what's our song? And
do they play this at Hawks games now?
Well, so it's crazy because Welcome to Atlanta, I made this song for everybody. But the football team, I think, took the song. So the Falcons, it became like the Falcon song. And I think the Hawks got mad and was like, they didn't want to use the same song that the Falcons used. And I'm like, this is not, I made the song for everybody.
Yeah.
A couple of days ago, me and Usher threw out the pitch at the Braves game, and I basically started the game. And they played Welcome to Atlanta at the Braves game, and I was really happy about that because I'm like, okay, thank God they're not tripping about this. But at the Hawks, I think the Hawks they try to stay away from what the Braves and the Falcons are doing. They try to find some other song, but I'm the only rapper in Atlanta with a song called Welcome to Atlanta.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned this is something that's really interesting to me, and when Joycelyn and I first talked, she's pointing out to me how there's like really a blurry line between R&B and hip hop. And you mentioned Usher, and I was going back and listening through your catalog, and I was listening to My Way, which was like 97. And I'm listening to the drum beat, and it's got that like hi-hat pattern, that complicated trap music pattern. And to me, that's that's R&B, but I hear that. And then I hear you on that Money Long song, and it's the same thing. And to me, that's like church music. and it's all like this blend. And you had pointed that out to me as just like, that's just common sense. And so I wonder, like, did all these things blend like that? But to me, they're just totally disparate genres. So is there something intrinsically Atlanta about that like you guys, that it's just kind of all part of the same music soup to celebrate?
Well, I think, well, no, let me say this, so just so you can understand. I'm a hip hop person. I don't like R&B music. The Usher's My Way record was the first R&B album I ever produced on a solo male.
Wait, did you just say you don't like R&B music? You heard it here first.
Yeah. I mean, it's just crazy because I come from hip hop. I was birthed in basically shell toes, spinning on my head, breakdancing, loud music. I was more into that space. That's how I grew up. I grew up wanting to be a b-boy. I wanted to be the first person to do graffiti on the MARTA train. It was like I was determined to do this. This was like, yeah, that's me right there. Look, but yeah, this was and this was in 1983 or 84, and I was 12 years old, and I was on tour with Houdini, Run DMC, Fat Boys, and there's a tour called the Fresh Fest. And in that tour, from 12 to probably 15. Yeah, over the 3 years of being on that tour, all I learned about and all I knew was hip hop, and all I cared about was hip hop. So when you listen to the Usher record, Usher's record is the heartbeat of My Way is all hip hop, because that's that's just me, that's just what I know. So when you say it sounds like it's just meshing, I guess it is, because that's just how my head is. I didn't lead with R&B. I led with what I like and what I love, which is hip hop. And then, the melodies and everything else just came on. I just put that on top of it.
And so I'm curious, because you told me that, was it when you were growing up here that Houdini was one of the groups that came to your school? What year was that?
Yeah, so I think I was either in the 7th or 8th grade at Southwest Middle School, which is now Jean Charles Young. It's an Atlanta public school. And Houdini, Orange Juice Jones, New York City Breakers, they came to the school to, before it was called social marketing, it was to kind of keep us in school. It was like a stay in school, don't drop out of school type effort. And they came and performed with this message of staying in school. And that happened a lot in APS. Roxanne Shante came, I think, in the early 80s to the Civic Center, and a bunch of APS students came to hear her talk about, it was like a Just Say No campaign, which is kind of funny, but, but it was, using hip hop in these very educational ways to get us excited about certain things and get us excited about learning and staying in school and not ending up on drugs or doing all the things that were happening in the early 80s, specifically when, crack cocaine and that epidemic hit our communities pretty hard.
And so your education, because you got a start in music business super young, so your education was happening in part like on tour, right? And I know your father was in the music business. So was that like that? I mean, you're 12 when this happened. You're going on the road. So
yeah, I'm such a musical dinosaur in Atlanta that when I was this age on tour, no kid in Atlanta had ever went on tour in the Atlanta public school system. No kid, not one person. So the Atlanta public school system had never heard of a kid getting a tutor and coming back and giving them the grades from the tutor. So we tried this. I came off tour, and Atlanta public school system said, we never seen this before. I know we told you we could do this, but we never did this before. And they tried to leave me back from from the year that I had went to school.
So that's like what, 7th grade?
No, I was in like 6th grade.
Okay.
And I had to make a decision at that point. And I'm 12 years old trying to make a decision about my life, but I really did. I made a real decision that I was gonna try, you know what I mean, I was gonna try to do whatever I had to do, but my focus was school, and I'm saying this in the school right now, I hate to say this, but it just didn't look like it was gonna work for me based on the way my cards was dealt. I didn't do anything wrong. We tried to do, but Atlanta was that just goes to show you how far away from this life of Atlanta wasn't, we wasn't even up on that. Like, we didn't even have kids this is before Tyler Perry. This is before anybody is acting in Atlanta. This is before TV shows are being shot in Atlanta. This is, the Flintstones, just basically. So it's crazy to like see that that's what happened, because it could, my life could have been completely different. But I think that the fact that I had that in my head, and I knew that, if I'm gonna do this, I'm gonna be left back. I never wanted to be left back. That's not, who wants to be left back, right? Nobody wants to be left back and say that. So I actually kind of just like got out of school at 6th grade. I think that's when, I didn't drop out. I tried to do home study at that point, but that wasn't even working either, because they still wasn't taking my grades. It was still like trying to figure out where was I going to turn to, and my teacher was my aunt. My aunt is an actual real teacher. So I was on tour with my aunt, and she was my teacher, and she was actually a real teacher, right? So it wasn't like I was missing school and I was doing all these other things. I was trying to do everything I had to do, but like I said, the way the system was set up, it didn't work for me. So I had to make this decision of like really pushing myself to turn into Jermaine Dupri.
And so what was the name of the middle school you were at?
You said what?
The middle school where you were in school. West Clayton, was it? Yeah. And so that's in Fulton County? That's Fulton County. Okay.
Yeah, that's Riverdale College Park.
Okay.
Yeah.
So because, this is all like a...
Clayton County, I guess.
Yeah, Clayton County. Yeah, West Clayton is Clayton County.
So because this has all been an education for me, and you came on my radar, Joycelyn, when I saw your TED Talk, which has one of the most arresting titles I've ever seen, for those who love God and trap music. And again, I feel like a total outsider, because it's, to me, like something like that I heard when you were like, the audience was like, everyone knew exactly what you meant. You know what I mean? If you would, could you elaborate on what that title means?
I think that it represents our generation. I talk about Atlanta's creative class. Like, there's this creative class that really laid the blueprint for what Atlanta has become. And I believe that we were taught to love God, but we also love trap music. And it's not even really that deep. It's really just it's really like the way in which we grew up in an environment where we were taught civil rights, we were taught justice, we went to school and would see many of these civil rights leaders at the grocery store or just in our environment. But we also grew up alongside this music, and this music rising during a time when crack cocaine was hitting our neighborhoods, during the Atlanta child murders, all of these moments in time that I think contributed to what I believe one of Atlanta's greatest innovations is trap music, and even just the language around how the music is described. So that's really what I was talking about in that TED Talk, was trying to give some sort of foundation to who this generation is, and that it was by design that this was a generation that would go on to contribute to just Atlanta's overall social and economic and entrepreneurial climate that it now has. I believe that this generation is very much a part of that.
But that's where I would argue it does get deep, is because you're talking about pretty interesting theories about why you think that came up. And so I want that to be what we talk about, but first maybe could you tell the audience what it is you do? What is educational anthropology, cultural anthropology, ethnography, things like that?
Yeah, so I went to Benjamin Mays High School, and one of the things that I think is really key to this conversation is understanding how the educational climate or just the climate of schooling and the role that it plays in hip hop becoming what it is, right? So if we want to put it in that type of context, what cultural anthropology allows me to do is look at the ways in which humans create, interact with, and shape the cultures that they are a part of, and then the ways in which we create ways to express that experience. And hip hop is a way that we express that experience. And it comes out of a time when the party that was considered to be the genesis of hip hop was a back to school party. It was a back to school jam that was promoted by Cindy Campbell, the sister of DJ Kool Herc, Clive Campbell, and their whole goal, I believe, part of it, whether it was communicated at that time, was to have these youth fortify themselves before they went back to school. And this is in '73, right? So this is during a time when school desegregation is moving along pretty slowly. It's 2 decades after Brown versus Board of Education.
I was only 1 year old. I don't know what she's talking about. Just
yeah, right. We were just
so y'all know.
We were
just
like
so we
born
clear.
into it. Like we were one. We were both like 1 year old, right? But they were 18 and 16 and 15, meaning Kool Herc or Grandmaster Flash or Africa Bambaataa. Like they are 16, 15, 18 years old when they are really creating this community, this underground culture, so to speak, that's built around emceeing and DJing. And so this party becomes the genesis moment that is considered hip-hop's birthday. But I think the context that's really important here for Atlanta is this is also during the time that Atlanta's about to elect its first Black mayor. This is August '73, so he's campaigning, and the election was in November. So January of '74, he becomes Atlanta's first Black mayor. This is happening all at the same time, and when you put all of that in the pot of understanding what was happening as a cultural anthropologist, I'm looking at questions of, so what was Atlanta's role in creating hip hop and creating some of its social and political features at the same time that its cultural and expressive traditions were being created in one place, and another place they're electing a mayor that ultimately hires Alonzo Krim, and he's elected in '70. He's brought to Atlanta to run the biggest school system in the South after desegregation. And what he puts in place is what I like to call Black on Black education. He's hiring Black teachers, Black administrators, anyone who's teaching in Atlanta public schools. They are very much dedicated to this type of culturally relevant and culturally resilient type of instruction that borrows from also the cultural resources that are outside of the classroom, like hip hop. So it's under his tutelage that Houdini comes to Southwest Middle School, right? Or the New York City Breakers come to Southwest Middle School. And in these, the schools are incubating this energy in a way that dance crews then become independent labels, right? So, for example, Black Market Entertainment was a group of guys at Southwest Middle School, Vincent Phillips, Jonathan Smith, we know him as Lil Jon, Rob McDowell, and Dwayne Searcy, who grew up, at the time they would throw parties when we were in school, but then grew up to have a label that gives us a whole movement called crunk, right? And the music that comes out of that. So I'm asking questions like, what was happening in our schools at that time to nurture that energy and nurture that spirit? And this is how I came to the title of we are a generation that loves God and trap music, because at the same time, there are just so many different variables that are taking place simultaneously as hip hop is rising. And one is the election of Maynard Jackson. Another is, he's the superintendent from 74 to 1988. That's that's like golden age of hip hop, right? So I think that those are things that poured into us becoming this creative class of innovators, influencers, making songs like Welcome to Atlanta, to the point where we're here 2 decades later talking about it within the context of how it happened. So I study that.
So, and, not for nothing, but what I find really interesting is that your degree is in mathematics, right? And, I'm a guy who I had no aptitude for math, but I did for music, and I always really resented that people would overhype this connection between math and music, And because for me, it's like math is patterns. Math is looking for patterns. And so it made me think that, so my point is, while I'm diverging here, is that there are patterns everywhere, and math is a way of making sense of our world. And so I wonder how much, because in that TED Talk, you talk about this is a map of Atlanta public schools in the early 80s, I believe. Mm-hmm. You know what? This thing has a pointer on it. Check this out.
I see the green light.
Is it the green light on the screen? Okay, check this out.
Oh, want me to do it?
Yeah.
I can't see that part.
Okay. Well, can you describe what I'm looking at? Because it looks like a crossword puzzle to me. But what I wanted to say was, I would gather that your background as a mathematician help you come up with this theory, because in the TED Talk you say there are these concentrated clusters along along a periphery on the western side where a creative class emerged.
Yeah, so if you look at schools like Benjamin Mays, if you look at a school like Frederick Douglass, or even Thurl, these are schools that are on Atlanta's west side, southwest side, and there's a dense population of that creative class that went to these schools. So, for example, Mays High School, Shanti Das is from Mays High School. Vincent Phillips is Mays. Rosanda Thomas, who's Chilean TLC, is Mays. And these are just some of the names that we know, because these are folks who are either on the forefront of creating the music. Shanti Das was the person that was basically marketing and was the architect behind the marketing of Outkast when they first came out. And went on to do excellent in so many different things in the industry. And so, but then there are others that went to these schools whose names we don't know, but they are engineers, they are lawyers, they are people who were incubated in these magnet programs. So even at a Douglass, which their magnet program was engineering, Raheem Beyah is the dean for the College of Engineering at Georgia Tech. He went to Douglass, right? But so did Killer Mike, so did T.I. There are so many different folks. So then when you come to Thurl, or even Harper High School, Divine Stevens. Thurl, you have Patrick Brown and DJ Toomp, people who created and laid the blueprint for what Atlanta has become. And then we can't even forget, the Fulton County schools, right? So you have Dallas Austin. I believe Dallas came out of Lakeshore. MD Collins, yeah. And then you have Mr. DJ or Ludacris coming out of Banneker. So I don't think that this is by happenstance. As a mathematician, I'm looking at these patterns and I'm asking questions like, what is happening, or what was happening in these schools during this time that created this creative class of influencers and youth influencers that completely shifted the way in which we even talk about hip hop now? Those are the questions I ask.
And then, in Jermaine, I understand that you were mostly on tour while your peers were in high school, but when you would come back, was there a particular community that you were associated with and people that you would hang out with and absorb some of what was going on?
Yeah, so I'm from College Park basically, and when I would come back home, I would go to these schools she's talking about, because the thing is, what's interesting about this that people don't talk about is that, like I said, the life of culture. When you talk about culture, we just say it like it's when people, but it's a life of culture that is happening, and that's what's happening at all of these schools. So, I actually I didn't know nothing about these schools. I'm from one side of I'm from the south side, Old National side, and this is Mays is the west side. But only way I got to know about this is that they had talent shows. There was talent shows at every one of these schools. So it was a talent show in Riverdale High School, it was a talent show at Mays, it was a talent show at Darrow, it was a talent show at all of these places. And I'm trying to win all the talent shows. I'm trying to go to every talent show and win. Because once I found out that you didn't have to go to the school to enter the talent show, then I'm like, oh, I'm going to all of these talent shows. I'm going to win, right? And that's basically a lifeline that people don't actually talk about. And I did this show called The Rap Game, and I flew kids in from other cities to come be a part of, to get into the rap game. And the kids that was coming to Atlanta, they were coming here from Chicago, they was coming from other places. And their stories, when I heard them telling their stories, they talked about how it was nothing in those cities that kids could do. There was nothing for kids to do in these other cities. And I thought about how fortunate I was as a kid because of school. Right? So I have a crazy story. I dropped out of school, but I was going to school. You know what I mean? But yeah, the schools played a very, very important role in my life, because the schools opened the doors for you to come in and showcase your talent to people like we're doing right now. And I won one. I came in second place in another one. I won another one. And what happened was people started knowing me from these little places. And I think at Southwest Middle School is where I met. And Southwest Middle School, you went to Southwest too, right? See, Southwest Middle School is where she would go before you go to Mays. By the way, I didn't go to school. I just learned all this through going to these talent shows. Yeah. And I have nobody showing me. My mother would drop me off at these places, and I'll go in here and I'll try to get in these talent shows, and they'll take me.
What were you doing in the talent shows? What were you performing?
You said what?
What were you performing in the talent shows?
I was dancing. So this was before rap. I wasn't even rapping. This was like that picture. Mm-hmm. I was dancing. So I was dancing. My best Michael Jackson impression, and and breakdance or whatever I knew. Also, I didn't know a lot because this was prior to the Fresh Fest. So my story started in these schools doing this, dancing around, going places. And at Southwest Middle School, I met MC Shadi, who MC Shadi at the time was the most popular rapper in Atlanta prior to Kilo. And then it was Shadi and Kilo. But Shadi basically was the guy in the city. I met him at Southwest. And then I started trying to cling to him because I saw people clinging to him. And we became friends, and as much as we could possibly be. And he wrote me my first rap song. This is before I was even writing songs. He wrote me my first rap song, and
what's it called?
It's called "It's Me, JD." It's me, JD. Okay. That's it. And I performed that song on the third year of that tour. So it was 84, 85, and 86. And 86 is when I started rapping. Okay. The first 2 years before that, I was just dancing.
Okay.
But I say that all to say that in that space, I was never introduced to any of these people that she's talking about outside of these schools. So I met Dallas Austin because he's from my neighborhood in College Park, and they had this dance crew called FDC. The FDC was the dance crew that I met at these talent shows. I didn't know who these people were. Inside FDC was Divine Stevens, who's the person that she talked about. Divine Stevens actually went on to become the person who introduced the world to Akon, right? Divine Stevens, and I think it was just based on fact that like you have something and we don't have it, right? Because I had equipment at my house, and these kids that was dancing, they didn't have the equipment to get their tapes made for the talent show, right? So they looked at me like, hey, let's use your house for the thing. And I'm like, okay, cool. So I'm like, I made the dance mixtape for FDC when they was entering they was dancing at Mays High. I'm the person who made their mixtape. So I met all of these people. You didn't know that, huh?
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Do you have any of those tapes?
Yeah, I did all that.
Oh, cool.
But I didn't know I still didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know that I was doing this for people. You know, I just had turntables at my house, and I was making my own little thing. But I think that's what it was. And I think that even when she says about with Maynard Jackson and hip hop connecting, I think Atlanta became a borrowing system from where you borrow energy from one person to the next. And that's just what it was. Like, I saw Dallas being a guy from my neighborhood, and the first guy I ever saw on Old National Highway with Mercedes and trucks and cars and all of this from the music business. And that energy, I believe that energy spilled into me. Like, I wanted that bad. And I just started like going to the studio when he was making the Boys II Men album and being around him and all of that. And I just was soaking up all of that energy. And then, I really believe in motivation like that. Like when people say use things, I say use things to motivate you. You definitely can use things to motivate you and really, really push you to get to where you want to go. And that's what I think Atlanta's built on.
So it's like there's like would you say it's like there's more of a community happening than in other parts? Like, there's the famous story with Outkast when they won that, was it a Source Award?
Source Award. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and it was like kind of at the height of an East-West Coast battle with rap, and then...
Yeah, and Atlanta was just neutral. The South was just neutral to the whole thing. And so for him to say the South got something to say, which has been just remixed over and over and over again, but at the heart of it, I think what he was really saying is that we have something going on, and you all are going to know about it very soon. Mm-hmm. And this album here is going to open the floodgates for not only what Jermaine is doing, but what so many other folks are doing in the South, in Atlanta, period. And it has not changed. 94 is such a watershed year in just hip hop, period. Mm-hmm. But for Atlanta, it shifted, and it has not shifted back. Mm-hmm. And it's not going to shift back, because now Atlanta is very much a part of hip hop history. Mm-hmm. I'm very careful about talking about hip hop history from this East Coast perspective that does not include what was happening here in Atlanta at the time, because culture just doesn't work that way. It doesn't just spring up and say, hey, I'm here. Like, there are things that are happening simultaneously, and once you get a few years back, like 50 years back now with hip hop, you have the reflection, the historical reflection, to be able to put pieces together to say, okay, this is a much bigger piece. So Atlanta's very much a part of that story. And I think that's what I believe, that's one of the elements of what Andre is saying in that statement.
So this brings up another point, and that's because another facet of what you do is hip hop scholarship and teaching, creating curricula at different levels. So I'm curious to know, like, if you were to include this song, Welcome to Atlanta, how do you teach it?
You can use it in different ways depending on different levels. So hip hop being integrated into the classroom is something that's done as early as pre-K. You have folks that are studying how to, we all, maybe not all of us, but many of us in here know about Schoolhouse Rock. It's nothing different than putting, music to rhyme, to teach a particular skill. But then you have the other spectrum to teach critical thinking, to get into folks' identities and talk about their identities. So a song like Welcome to Atlanta could be used as early as elementary to talk about geography, right? But then I'm in higher ed, and so we could talk about so many other things out of that song. We could compare it to other geographical anthems to understand just the nuance of the identities of different places. So you could compare it to New York State of Mind or even California Love, West Coast, just to kind of get students talking about hip hop in general, but how where you're from matters. And that fromness is what gives you the nuance of how a person came up and how they see themselves.
And, I want to bring up another point because I realized was a beloved Village Voice music critic named Greg Tate, who is a big part of the New York music community. And he wrote a book that came out pretty much at the same time as Welcome to Atlanta, like while I'm up there and white kids are saying crunk. And he put this book out, and the title speaks for itself, Everything But the Burden, What White People Are Taking from Black Culture. And
Did you hear the whoa?
yeah. As both like creators and scholars of Black culture, I'd be interested in what your perspective is on this. It's a really staggering title.
Yeah, and what he was talking about was, you can enjoy the culture, you can produce the culture, you can engage with people of the culture. But I think when he's talking about everything but the burden of dealing with the racial politics that comes along and that informs the creation of the culture, you don't necessarily have to deal with that. I think the socioeconomic burdens that come along, or that come along with it, and find stories about that in the culture. I think that's what he's saying. So I have that book. I have 2 copies of it, and it's a edited volume of chapters where you have scholars and essayists talking about different aspects of how white folks or white people are contributing and participating in hip hop. And I think that this is a conversation that, hip hop kind of turns this on its head if we're looking at it in an indigenous way, because it is a culture that says, hey, you can participate. The only thing you got to do is be yourself. Like, authenticity is huge. If you are not being yours, if you white and you trying to be black, you gonna get kicked out. Like, you see what happened to Vanilla Ice. You see what happened to Iggy Azalea. Eminem is still rocking because Eminem is like, this is who I am. I'm a white boy from Michigan, and I grew up poor, and that's where I find my alignment with you all. But I recognize that I'm white. And he recognizes his privilege, and he seems to try to use it as much as possible to push the culture forward. So I think that hip hop brings people together. There was a cultural exchange between rappers and hip hop and the punk community very early on, when hip hop is forging in the communities of New York. So,
in Fab Five Freddy and Blondie.
Right, Rapture. Yeah. So, and Jean Basquiat is in that video. So, and Fab Five Freddy, I think, is Flash in it, or she mentions Flash. Yep. So I think that type of cultural exchange begins to take place, but then it gets mainstream, right? And I think a lot of what is in that book is talking about when hip hop becomes so mainstream that it's now, it is popular culture. Like, it shapes popular culture. Everything is, have you ever just been watching TV and counted the number of commercials with that they're remixing hip hop songs? You might not notice it if you aren't familiar with it, but it's very much a part of the mainstream. And that is something that is separate from the burdens, and I say burdens in air quotes because I love being black. I wouldn't change it for the world. So it's not really a burden for me, but what comes along with being black and a woman, and the value that it gives you to create such wonderful songs like A Welcome to Atlanta. I think that those are the nuts and bolts that shape the culture and that's made it just so popular and made it such a musical and cultural phenomenon that everybody is able to participate in. But once you begin to start tripping, you know, you see what has happened to Drake, you know, like it's, you know, it's like you get kicked out, you know? I'm just saying, right?
Yeah, I say, she said Drake.
I'm just saying that's the latest one.
What I want to say about that is that what I feel like has happened to Drake is that he ran into the cultural storm of not actually understanding how cultural hip hop actually can be. And I think that's the same thing that happened with Andre and Outkast in New York with you know, because it's very interesting that night at the Source Awards, because Outkast was treated a certain way at the Source Awards, but I performed, right? So it was just like people weren't connecting the dots of like who was Atlanta, what was Atlanta, and what we were doing, and I feel like the same cultural storm that has hit Drake is the same thing that hit the rest of the world as Atlanta's storm. Because like I said, once again, there's so much inside of the Atlanta storm of culture that, you know, it's you, if you're here in Atlanta and you don't know how to skate and you ain't go to one of these schools and you don't live in one of these areas and you don't, we can immediately say, okay, you ain't from Atlanta.
No.
You know, you just.
The question is, where'd you go to school?
Yeah, like, you know, like, no disrespect, but when I was coming out here, I didn't know where I was going. I was like, I haven't been this far before. I'm sorry. I was I was in the car and I think I might have dozed off for a second, and I looked up and I said, "Hey, are we still in Georgia? Like, what's going on?" Nah, but I mean, you know, because once you know, I was a kid that lived on Old National Highway, and I didn't have money to get off Old National Highway. So I had money to go up Old National Highway and come back down Old National Highway. And I never got off the highway to even, you know, you go to Lenox Square when you live in College Park is like going to Disney World. At this point in time, in this time of my life. So yeah, it's just a cultural storm. And the things that are happening in these different areas, we all just put it in our music. And I, like I said, to just piggyback off that Drake thing, I think that's what it is. He messed with somebody who's from a place culturally. When you say Compton, you can think about 30, 40 different things that's happened in that place, right? Not just rap music. I mean, you know, Venus and Serena's from Compton. But their sister got shot by gang violence, right? And it's like, so then you think about the gangs, and this is LA's life. This is what's happening in LA. And it's just, but it's still all in this one space. It's all happening in this one area. And it's if you wind it up, it's too strong to fight for anybody. It's not just Drake, it's for anybody. You don't want to touch that. This is a cultural storm.
I mean, I think it says a lot that even on that song, Kendrick used Atlanta for a history lesson. Like, he gives us a history lesson on that ecosystem that you're talking about. Like, Atlanta's been doing this. Like, we're talking about Fulton County was the densest area in Atlanta of African Americans following emancipation. There was a migration here, an intentional migration to Fulton County. So
when was it? As part of the Great Migration?
Yeah, this is following emancipation. Okay. This is after 1865. This is when African Americans are like, we free and we can go wherever we want to go. A lot of Black people came to Fulton County. It was the densest county in Georgia concentrated with African Americans. So that cultural ecosystem is actually pre-Maynard Jackson. You know, we're talking about the groundwork for an Auburn Avenue and the Royal Peacock and many of the jazz artists who are performing down on Auburn Avenue.
What's
like
the
this,
Royal Peacock?
This Royal Peacock is like,
I'm from New York.
I mean, it was the spot. It
Yeah.
was the spot that Black artists came to perform, right? And it's down on Auburn Avenue, and I believe it's still down there, right?
Don't
Is
look
it
over
gone?
here. I don't know that.
Yeah.
That's.
I mean, it was down there for a very long time, and we were talking in the back about how you can leave Atlanta for 2 weeks and come back and something's gone and it's something new there, and it's like, dag. So that's why I'm like, is it still there? Because it might not be, but it has been. It was there for a very long time. It's called the Royal Peacock, and it was a venue for Black artists to come and perform.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
So we've got a few minutes to field some questions from the audience.
Oh, great.
So this first one, hip hop is evolving. While personally I feel there is always a need for quality, it says duality. We're gonna interpret it as both. Hip hop is evolving. While personally I feel there's always a need for duality, do you feel this same, or it needs to burn out, quality over quantity? I think, while personally, is the person who wrote that question willing to? Okay. Did you mean quality?
Yeah, I was typing really fast. My question is, with the new era of hip hop that's coming out now that we're experiencing, do you think that will burn out, or is it a need for both? Can both exist right now?
Quality and quantity.
Yeah. Sorry.
Well, it's pretty subjective, right?
You were saying, do we think it's going to burn out?
Yeah, it's like, I hate to use this as the second president coming to our hip hop era. Where do you see that in terms of where you're evolving, in terms of hip hop in general?
Me personally, I think I do believe it's gonna burn out. Just because of technology, I feel like is hurting the creative part of it. And you know, technology, people that's in tech, they don't even understand what I'm saying, and they think I'm supposed to be jumping at AI and all of this type of stuff. But that creates this laziness that the music that everyone loves was not built on this laziness. And you know, so yeah, I personally think it's gonna burn out unless someone younger than me and younger than that person understands what I'm saying, and they take it and they start moving around. Like I said, I was moving around. I was having this conversation last night with somebody, and they were saying that I'm a privileged person, and I'm like, I'm not privileged. I just moved around with no fear and no care, right? But I have $1 to my name, right? But I just, all I cared about was meeting somebody that could introduce me to somebody else, that could introduce me to somebody else. And now kids are sitting on the internet talking to people that ain't even real, right? And like, you know what I mean? And looking at pictures that somebody else, I just saw Trump make a picture and put Puffy face on. Yeah. Anyway, yeah. But yeah, it's what's happening right now because of technology. I feel like technology is a danger to the forward movement of hip hop.
Which is crazy because technology and innovation is at the heart of it. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah, but the heart is not created by those that create the music, right? It's created by people that are trying to get rich off of people who make the music.
I hear you.
And that's never,
Yeah.
Kind of not unrelated to that, what makes you both the most nostalgic? let's say specifically as it relates to Atlanta culture?
I think being able to draw on these memories, of, you know, you may have heard this, like people say Atlanta's not a real place. I mean, it really isn't. Like there's no other place like Atlanta. I've lived in LA, I've been to New York, I've been to different places, and I'm always ready to get home to Atlanta. And so I think being able to be a part of a community that, regardless of whether you had $1 to your name, like we were taught that we was you know what I'm saying? We believed it. We really believed it. And I think those are the things that make me say, dag, I wish that some of my nieces and nephews had the same experience, but I had it so I could pour it into them. So I think those are some of the things that make me really nostalgic. And just hearing some of the music that came out of Atlanta, some of the music that just comes out of just early hip hop. I taught a 90s hip hop class last semester, and the fact that many of my students hadn't even heard of Southern Playalistic Cadillac music, or they had never heard of Illmatic. I mean, but when you do the math, some of them weren't even born, right? And so unless you have a parent or someone in your circle that's introducing you to the music, then you're not going to hear about it. But at the end of the semester, they had to curate a playlist, and to just see that they had dumped Diggable Planets into their playlist, or ATLians, just they love 90s hip hop. And those are the things that make me really nostalgic, because it makes me feel like I'm pouring what I experienced as, first or second wave hip hop into them. And they can understand that it wasn't always like this. And these weren't always the stories. And there was some balance, to your point. You could turn on the radio and you could hear Lil' Kim and Lauryn Hill. Like it was some range. And so those are the types of nostalgic things that make me excited, that I try to pour into the people that I'm around.
What about you, Jermaine?
I think the gap of knowing that it needs help excites me, because I can help. I know I can help.
You're already helping. The Money Long song, how long has it been on the chart?
Well, I mean, I'm just saying, but yeah, I think that the competitor in me likes the fact of the question that she just asked about, is it going to go away? Because that it drives me to have to do something. It drives me to have to create something. I don't feel like I can be lazy in this space, right? Because people know that I know I have the knowledge to do what I need to do. I just got to put it to work, right? And that's how I go to work every day, basically, knowing that. And I know, like I was telling people, I tell people all the time, if this is just the way my mind thinks, AI is created by a man. This is not something that this is not, that we don't have to deal with this, right? This is something that somebody is creating and telling people in the music business that this is what you should be doing. I don't subscribe to none of that. I'm gonna tell that person what they need to do with their AI.
So we got time for one more question that's kind of tail off of that one, or what you just said. How can we ensure that the original goals and aspirations of hip hop are preserved as it continues to evolve over time?
We must do things like this. And I think that's another thing I want to say about the South, is that, when we started doing things in Atlanta, people saw it was done with truth, as opposed to being done with trying to destroy or deface something or anything like that. I remember I had a birthday. My birthday's on Monday, by the way, and I was having a birthday. Thank you. I was having a birthday party at the High Museum, right? And they told me, people was like, you can't get the High Museum. You know, it's the High Museum, right? And I'm like, I'm going to have a birthday party in the High Museum. I want the whole museum. Because they were saying you could do it in the place where they have the orchestra. And I'm like, yeah, we'll have a concert in there, but we're going to have a party out here in the main room. And we're going to have we're going to take the whole place. And people thought I was like exaggerating. Or they also thought, it had never been done before. No one had ever had a party there when I did it. I also had a birthday party at the Botanical Garden, right? I did, and it was just, and I think when she says Atlanta is not a real place, it's because of things like that. But we lead with truth, and people understand, like, if you bring that energy that we're putting into this music and the people that's coming, and just that good energy, Southern hospitality, it just turns into something else. And we weren't violent from the 90s. You know what I mean? 92, 93, 94, Atlanta was nothing but creativity. TLC, ABC, Jagged Edge, 112, Escape, Crisscross. Like, there's just a list of artists that's just creativity and just creative. And as long as we continue to do that, and I think that's the key to us preserving is continue to keep pushing that truth. The younger generation has to hear her speak and hear people like myself, I think, speak, and just so they can understand the doors that open based on you leading with truth and really, really want to make a difference, as opposed to just like I said, just sitting back thinking that it's going to happen on Instagram.
Yeah, and I want to add to that, like, hip hop and higher ed is a big deal now. We're talking about a field that is celebrating 30 years, a little over 30 years of existence. As a matter of fact, I just want to put this thing, I love putting stuff in context. So in 1994, April of 1994, so we get Nas's Illmatic drops. The Tuesday following that, then CDs came out on Tuesdays. The Tuesday following that, Outkast dropped Southern Playalistic, and a couple of weeks after that, Trisha Rose dropped a book called Black Noise, and it was the first real academic text on hip hop and rap music. She wrote her dissertation on rap music, and when I got that book, I said, that's what I want to do. I want to do it, and I want to do it in a way that brings it into the schools. And this was in 97. I was a math teacher, and at the same time, I was writing for Rap Pages and Double XL. And my first music review that I wrote was the So Deaf Bass All Stars, Volume 3. It was a music review for that. And when I published it, I remember taking it to school to students, and that's when I realized, okay, it's something about using hip hop in the classrooms that's beyond just cognitive development. Like, it became a bridge between teacher and student. And that is something that's happening in K through 12 education, but it's also happening in colleges and universities, the Hip Hop Archive at Harvard. I have a Hip Hop Archive over at Georgia Tech. Georgia State just started a Hip Hop Studies minor degree. So there are institutions that are preserving hip hop, not in just the archival space, but in the curriculum and instructional space. And that is getting us to that generation that you're talking about and teaching them about the culture that they're already impacted by, but they think they've come up with a lot of these styles. But when you actually give them the historical context, it's like, wow, this is a lot bigger and a lot deeper than I thought. So I think that's going to be hip hop, and its connection to higher ed is going to continue to get bigger and bigger and continue to work alongside entertainment. I mean, we're here at Emory, an entertainer, an educator, talking about hip hop in both of these spaces and both of these industries. And entertainment is an industry, education is an industry. So I think that's going to probably be one of the ways of the future, is seeing hip hop being more and more integrated into our colleges and our universities.
Everyone, please help me give it up for Dr. Joycelyn Wilson and Jermaine Dupri.
If you're in Atlanta this fall, don't miss Jermaine's So Deaf R&B Experience, Saturday, October 12th at Wolf Creek Amphitheater with Division, Money Long, Eric Bellinger, and more. For tickets, go to varietyent.net. For more information about Joycelyn's work, be sure to visit the Hip Hop 2020 Innovation Archive, hiphop2020.org. Sing for Science is co-produced by Talkhouse and made possible in part by a grant from the Simons Foundation. Our music is by Panoram, social media manager is Bailey Constas, digital producer is Keenan Cush, and location, camera, and sound was by Noel Goff and Chuck Tedder at Atlanta Pro AV. Special thanks to Darren Wong, Ken Carter, and everyone at Emory Ideas Fest. If you like Sing for Science, the best way you can support us is to give us a review, tell a friend about the show, and subscribe on your podcast platform of choice. For more information, please visit singforscience.org and follow us on social media at Sing for Science. Thanks for listening.